Welcome to the Big Success Podcast, cutting-edge conversations on business and personal success, as well as how to level up. Here's your host, #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars.
And this week on the Big Success Podcast, we have Dr. Tony Alessandra. He's a doctor because he did his Bachelor of Business from Notre Dame, his MBA from the University of Connecticut, and his PhD in marketing in 1976. So Tony's been a long-standing business teacher and a great friend. Georgia State University. He's the founder of Assessments 24/7. 32 books, 50 languages they've been translated in. So he's written a lot more than me and done a whole bunch. His first book was in 1979, Non-Manipulative Selling. Most recent book in 2021 was What Make Humans Tick. Literally given hundreds and hundreds of speeches across the world. The guy is an absolute genius on the subjects of persuasion, the ability to move people, sales, understanding people, behavioral. Let's welcome Dr. Tony Alessandra. And welcome to Big Success this week. Tony Alessandra, how you doing?
Doing great, Brad. How about you? Good?
It's a privilege to have you here on the podcast. You know, Tony, I always start with one simple question, but maybe it's not that simple. What is success to you? What's success mean?
Well, I love this quote from the Canadian novelist William Kinsella. He said that success is getting what you want, but happiness is wanting what you get. And so for me, success is happiness. In my life, as you probably know, I've had a lot of successes. There's no question about it. But initially, I was a university professor, and that was a great success. I got my PhD. This is one of the things that I wanted. But problem area was, I wanted to move away from being a full-time professor. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to reach many more people with my message. I wanted to make more money, and I wanted to travel. So what did I do? I quit teaching in 78 and became a full-time professional speaker because that was a goal. That was a success to me. And here I was averaging over 100 paid speeches per year. My travels unfortunately did not allow me to stay in any one location to enjoy the area and explore. I had to rush to another fly to another city. Problem was the heavy travel created medical issues for me, sinus infections, my back issues, sciatica. And although the pay was so much better than being a university professor, I realized that every dollar I earned as a speaker, I actually only kept 25% after paying my staff, bureau fees, overhead, taxes, et cetera. And it took me a while to realize that I had all this success as a speaker, but I wasn't happy. I just wasn't getting it. And because of all those negative realities, after 31 years of full-time speaking, I decided to start another business, which is the online Assessments 24/7 business, because I wanted to build a business that would generate ongoing revenue, where I didn't have to speak anymore, that I could actually sell the business. I could run the business from anywhere. So that's what I did. And it turned very successful because in 2016, I was able to not have to give another speech. And that business was generating, the assessment business, more money than I ever made in speaking. So it just allowed me to stay home, spend more time with my family. So the thing is happiness. That was the key.
So if you think back in your life, how old were you, or when did you actually decide to be successful? Because for me, it was like 13, I think. When did you decide to be a success?
Well, you're going to be intrigued by this. My mother, from when I was a little kid, always drilled into me, Anthony, always called me Anthony, not Tony. Anthony, you have to go the extra. And she said inch instead of mile, go the extra inch. And her whole thing was for me to get constant self-improvement in every area of my life, whether it was physically, mentally, socially, financially. So when did I choose to be successful? Probably in the first grade. because that's when I started focusing on improving every specific area of my life. But what it did, Brad, is it was that success getting what I wanted, not necessarily wanting what I got. I achieved a lot of success along the way, but it wasn't happiness. That's what I can tell you.
So if you think about it then success was almost chosen for you.
Exactly. Success, at least from my mother's point of view, which was drilled into me, was constant achievement, getting better grades, doing better in sports, whatever. It was my mother that drilled that into me.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great upbringing, obviously. I think as a parent, helping your kids decide to be successful, helping your kids do that is an important aspect. So let's think about this then. In your mind, how does success happen? Do you have a formula for success, or what's the methodology for success to happen?
Well, again, if success to you is getting what you want, then it's a matter of setting goals that are attainable, that require a little bit of stretch, putting a time limit on it so that you can accomplish it, and then achieving that goal. And once you achieve a goal or a success, then you set another goal. And it's, rinse, wash, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, but for happiness, if that's what success is to you, you need to really step back and say, okay, achieving all of these things, is that really success to you? And for me, it wasn't. And for many people, achieving these little goals or big goals, that's what success is to them, and all the better to them. But to me, it was happiness.
Yeah, well, if you look back at your definition of success, it grew, changed, and evolved over time. Do you think that it'll evolve further in your lifetime, or do you think that happiness is going to be the thing?
Oh, happiness is the thing for me. Believe me, I'm real happy now. I'm really content. Everything is going well.
So let's go back to that goal setting then, and achieving those goals and thinking of it from that perspective, because even happiness is still a goal. What is the process in your mind of that happening? How does that work? How do we achieve our goals? I mean, obviously first you got to set them, but what's the process from there?
Well, again, you have to, I like incremental achievements. So for instance, here's an example. My very first book, I got a contract to write my first book. This was in 1978. Book was called Non-Manipulative Selling. And I put on my to-do list, write the book. And every day I'd look at that to-do list and I would say, well, I don't have time to do it today. And 90 days went by. My publisher said, hey, I'm going to give you another 90 days. Otherwise, you have to give me back the advance. Another 90 days went by. I didn't do it. I did get the publisher to give me a little extra time. And one of my buddies, who was a best-selling author, said, Tony, how many pages will be in the book? I said, probably about 180. He says, how many days do you have? I said, 60 days they gave me, final 60 days. He said, so really what we're talking about is 3 pages a day. So anyway, he said, what you do is the first thing every morning is you sit down and you write your 3 pages. Now, if you're on a roll and you write more, fine. That doesn't forgive you to write the 3 pages tomorrow. He gave me another, I think, crucial tip. And this has to do with failure, because I was looking at failure. Even though I was writing the 3 pages, the next day I would look at a blank page. And Brad, I know you've written many, many books. And one of the biggest issues is starting the day with your writing, looking at a blank page. And he gave me what I thought was incredible advice. He said, Tony, end each day in the middle of a paragraph. Do not finish your thought, just end the day. And then the next day, you look at that paragraph, you know what you wanted to do to finish it. It's not a blank page anymore, and you're back into writing. So it was great to take me out of that potential failure of not writing the 3 pages.
Yeah. Well, let's go to that. How does failure teach success? Because I know that, I've made a bunch of mistakes. Some would call them failures. I know that you've had a few challenging days and weeks in lifetime. So how does failure teach success to us? Or how can we learn from it?
Well, you absolutely should learn from failure. Failure just tells you what you did was not the right direction to go in. And if you learn from those failures, it tells you how to self-correct. Great examples are Abraham Lincoln, who failed so many times trying to get elected to office, learning each time, and then eventually becoming president of the United States. Or what's his name? Edison, who failed so many times, but he always said that led me closer and closer to creating, let's say, the light bulb or whatever. I just think it really tells you it's a self-correction step. That's what failures are. I always look at failures as, okay, I learned something. Now let me try something different. And it seems, at least for me, it always works, because I don't look at failure as I'm done. I just look at it as the next step.
Yeah, I lost that point. So let me go and play the next point. He's the author of The Platinum Rule, Dr. Tony Alessandra. Will be back on the Big Success Podcast in just a moment.
Serious income success for you will come through Brad Sugar's Scalability event. Massive business growth and understanding how you turn your business into a commercial, profitable enterprise that works for you so that you don't have to. Visit bradsugars.com to attend this program as a standalone or as part of Brad Sugars' Entrepreneurial University.
And you're back on the Big Success Podcast. I'm Brad Sugars, #1 business coach in the world, and your host today, Dr. Tony Alessandra. Tony, sales, one of the subjects you've taught on for many, many years. How do you succeed at sales?
Well, first of all, you need to learn the basics of sales. Even people who, quote, are considered born salespeople, if they don't have the process down pat, they'll do okay. They may even do well, but they're not going to do great. Give me somebody who's not a born salesperson. Let me train them. Let you train them, Brad, and I will tell you they will succeed. So first of all, it's knowing what to do in sales. For me, success in sales was always getting that big account. I love to get the big account. And you may or may not remember this, but back in 2013, I wanted to get the Action Coach account for my assessment business. And I somehow, I don't know how I did it, but somehow convinced you to book me as a speaker in Berlin at one of your big meetings. And the topic I wanted to cover was DISC. Well, you remember Vic Ciuffatelli said to me, Tony, everybody knows DISC. Do not speak on it. And I did convince him to let me speak on it. I did a little bit different presentation than I would normally do. But, if I had not done that and persisted, I don't think I would have gotten your account. So it really, it's making sure that you have the persistence, the education, and know that eventually, if you keep trying, you're going to make a sale.
Like it. I like it a lot. So let's talk about DISC then. Understanding people, like you've talked about, you can read people real fast. The profiling tools, all of that stuff. How do we succeed with that?
Well, I think, first of all, you need to know what DISC is. DISC, dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. 4 basic patterns of behavior. And in sales, Brad, I always tell people you need to adjust your selling style to match the customer's buying style. So if you're an I who loves to elaborate and tell stories and maybe every so often get off the subject and be a little bit playful, and you're selling to
now who are you describing right there, Tony? Who do you happen to be describing?
Well, anyway, you're great in flexibility, Brad. Even though you're a high I, you know how to talk D, S, and C. And that really is the key. A high I selling to a C, you need to tone it down. You need to be flexible, adaptable. So first, when it comes to this, you need to know how to differentiate who you're talking to or who you're selling to or who you're managing. And in selling in particular, I like to open up a sales meeting or sales presentation with asking open-ended questions, such as, Brad, I know, you started Action Coach. Tell me a little bit about how that happened. What I'm trying to get at is to get some information about you and your background, but also I want to determine, are you faster paced or slower paced? Are you more task oriented or relationship oriented? And I know the things that I need to look for to determine whether you're open or guarded, direct or indirect, because people who are open and at the same time direct are high I's. People who are guarded and direct are the high D styles, and so on. So I want to be able to ask those questions to get you to give me the opportunity to read your verbal, vocal, and visual behaviors. Once I can identify, even on one scale, open versus guarded, direct versus indirect, I can then adjust what I'm doing. I can speed up, slow down. I can get right down to business, or I can build rapport a little bit more. But the key is you got to do some things to know the other person's style, and then you adjust. This is a great concept. We have the online assessments. I would say in sales, it's very difficult to get a prospect to take an online assessment. Hey, Brad, before I come to call on you, would you please fill this out? Here we are on Zoom, and I had an idea on Zoom where before I came into this Zoom meeting, this is your Zoom meeting, I was put in a waiting room. Imagine if you put people in a waiting room and you ask them two questions with some context. Are you more open or guarded, more direct or indirect? So while they're in the waiting room, they're answering these two questions. So when they come in, you know what their style is because they've already told you.
Yeah, I love looking at prospects' emails, their text messages, how they've communicated to work out their DISC profile, or even work out their visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and that sort of thing. Tony, with 32 books under your belt, it's hard to decide what subjects to ask you about success on. But I want to go to emotional intelligence. How do we succeed with emotional intelligence?
Well, again, emotional intelligence is one of those topics right now that is a very hot topic in business. So, and I think emotional intelligence is very similar in a sense to DISC, because it's about how well you are able to read the room, basically. Maybe not read the room in terms of DISC, but read the room in terms of the people you're dealing with. So that's what emotional intelligence really is. There are some people who are totally, they don't know anything about people. They don't know how to communicate to people. Whereas emotional intelligence, I think you have to have good questioning, listening, and feedback skills. I think those are crucial. And especially the listening part of it. Many people are not good listeners. I have a 6-year-old grandson who I can tell you right now, he has incredible emotional intelligence. He's very sensitive. He's outgoing, but he's also sensitive, and he knows how to connect with people. And I think there's where emotional intelligence can really help us.
Well, let's jump with people. Yeah, let's jump into relationship building. What's the success secrets of relationship building, especially in business?
Well, I think number one, building trust and credibility. People do business with people they like and trust. So the first thing I want to do is to get people to trust me, and hopefully beyond that, like me. It makes things a lot easier. If somebody doesn't like you or doesn't feel comfortable with you, they do what may be a negative bias of everything you're presenting to them. Whereas if they like you and they feel comfortable with you, they put a positive bias on everything you're saying and doing. So I think, building this rapport with people, I like to think that I have emotional intelligence. I know DISC because I've been teaching it for 48 years. But I've had to develop, I'm a high D style, very dominant. I've had to develop my listening skills. It's not something that came naturally to me. But I'll tell you, when it comes to listening, when I speak, I only know what I know. But when I listen, I not only know what I know, I also know what you know. And that's one of the keys to influencing other people, whether it's in sales, leadership, or even parenting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the crazy things of doing a podcast is my job is to just shut up. That's my job. So let's talk about the opposite of that, where your job is to speak. You did for 30 years, massive success as a public speaker. If someone wanted to get the top 2 or 3 tips to being a great public speaker and succeeding in that realm, what would you say to them?
Well, when I first started speaking back in the 70s, I spoke like I was a university professor, and which was not my natural style. I thought that's what you had to do because I was at the time a university professor. And it wasn't until 82 that one of the greats of speaking, Bill Gove, came up to me and said, Tony, off stage, you are funny, you're playful, you're a New York City Italian. None of that is coming across on stage. You need to allow you to come out on stage. And once I started doing that, it really turbocharged my career. When you go through Toastmasters, they tell you certain things about speaking, that may work and may not work. For me, it didn't work. Don't put your hands in your pockets. Well, me, I get away with that because of my style, but other people may not. So the first tip, Brad, be yourself. Make sure you allow you to come out on stage. Another area that I learned from my buddy Jim Cathcart, one of the greats of speaking, he said, Tony, just getting up there and giving your speech and not doing all the prep work in advance is hurting you. And when he said prep work, he said, first of all, you need to learn about the audience, who they are, what they do, and how your speech might impact them. Secondly, you need to look at everything in the room that you're speaking at. So look at the staging, the microphone, the slides, the lighting, everything. Work all that out. And he used the example of going to a restaurant. Going to a restaurant, it's not just the meal. See, the meal in speaking would be the speech. He said also what would give you a 5-star in a restaurant is the ambiance. And he said all of these things about the setting of the speech is the ambiance of you giving a speech. So I would say make sure you do your homework. You are prepared. You know about the audience. You get there early. You do a run through in terms of lighting, staging, sound, slides, everything. And that's it. Those are 2 of the key things.
Brilliant. We'll be back on the Big Success Podcast. We're going to talk about leveling up, going from good to great with the Dr. Tony Alessandra.
Dr. Alessandra offers audiences the opportunity to have fun while learning practical, immediately applicable skills that positively impact their relationships with prospects, customers, and coworkers. To learn more about Dr. Tony Alessandra, please visit his website today.
And we're back on the Big Success Podcast. Dr. Tony Alessandra, let's talk about leveling up, going from good to great. What do you think's the keys from moving to good to being great or amazing in success world?
Well, that goes back to my mother's going the extra inch. And I believe no matter how good you are, you actually can get better. And what drove this home for me, and initially I had a negative reaction, is I remember coming home one day from school, so excited to show my mother I got a 99 on my exam. And my mother, who's the classic, New York Italian mother, looked at it and said, what happened to the other 1%?
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
But that was my mother, so that created that mentality of always trying to get better and better and better. I don't know how much you know about American baseball. Living in San Diego, we have the San Diego Padres. And one of the greats, if not the greatest San Diego Padre, was Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn was so good. He won 8 batting titles playing for the Padres. But here was the interesting thing. Tony Gwynn initially was a really good baseball player. But he wanted to be great. So he was always the first one out to practice. He was always the last one to leave. He videotaped every one of his at-bats. And when he got home, he would watch his at-bats. He'd study pictures. And it was always to get better and better and better. A lot of people, and I know this is the same with you, Brad. A lot of people look at my successes, and I've had a lot of successes. I'm in at least 3 halls of fame.
Yeah.
And a lot of people look at this and say, wow, look at how much you've accomplished. What they don't see, Brad, is all my failures.
Yeah.
And there's many more failures than successes. In baseball, all you have to do is get 1 hit in every 3 at-bats and you're in the Hall of Fame. So to go from good to great is to make sure that you are constantly going through that extra inch, always looking for ways to get better and better and better. And when you see failure or failure happens to you, I have a saying, this too shall pass. And I'll tell you, it helps me get over the failures and picks me back up, working toward that constant self-improvement.
Love it. So let's talk about dreaming big then. Let's talk about how does someone go from thinking like millions to billions or hundreds of millions? How does someone go to dreaming big?
Well, again, it's you can't just dream going from, I would say, millions to billions. To me, that's too big a jump. But it's not accomplishable. I mean, you can accomplish it, but you're going to go from millions to tens of millions, and tens of millions to hundreds of millions, and then hundreds of millions to a billion. Again, it is that incremental stepping stone. So that's what you need to do, to go from the millions to the billions. It's really that stepping stone, making sure that you don't see, if you set your goals unrealistically high, Brad, it leads to frustration and maybe literally quitting. It can't be done. It's impossible. I quit. I give in.
Yeah, writing a whole book in a day versus 3 pages a day. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's what it's all about. So, it's learning from these failures that get you to that next step.
How did you scale up though, Tony? How did you go from thinking, okay, professor to 100 speeches a year? I mean, you scaled. You went from a normal income to a ridiculous income. How do you scale that thinking? What happened for you?
Well, what happened was I studied the people who were already there. I had mentors and role models, and I talked to them. I talked to a lot of people along the way. What do you do? What have you learned? How did you get from here to there? How did you get on this program or that program? So it wasn't doing it all on my own. I had a lot of people lifting me up. But to do that, I had to seek them out, build the relationship, and get them to be willing to help me, push me along. I went from a college prof earning $23,000 a year to a speaker doing 100-page speeches a year. But it wasn't, day one, I'm a professor, and day 2, I'm a speaker doing 100 speeches a year. No, it started where I had to give a bunch of free speeches so that people can see what I can do. And it built up like that. Again, it's like walking up a high, large flight of stairs. You don't just go from the bottom all the way to the top. You got to go one stair at a time. So that's how you go from millions to billions.
All right, let's dive into the quick fire round. Tony, how do you have success with money, wealth? What's the success factors in your mind? The quick fire round.
I would say you earn enough money so that you can live a comfortable life, and you have enough money so that you can pay for the education of your kids and your grandkids, and you funded your retirement if you ever retire, and where you don't have to worry about it anymore, where you can do whatever you want to do because you have the wealth to do it. But Brad, I have seen too many of my colleagues, and I know you have done the same, where they could make $1 million in a year, but they do not save and invest. And all of a sudden, they hit a patch like 2008, the recession, or COVID. And what happens? Their money runs dry. They don't have savings. They don't have investments, and they're dead in the water. Maybe even having to claim bankruptcy.
Yeah. How do you have success at self-development?
I think reading a lot of books. I've read a lot of books, Psycho-Cybernetics, The Magic of Thinking Big, books that help me grow and give me a path, a way, how to win friends and influence people, things to do. But also, again, going back to those people that I admire who are successful, who've had great success, Zig Ziglar, Bill Gove, those people that I could look at and learn from.
And final question, Tony, best quote on success or best advice you were ever given on success?
Wow. Now that, I would say the best advice was define what success is to you, set your goals step by step to accomplish it, and then, as Nike says, just do it. Implement the plan. Success is a matter. It's not something that's magical. It's not something that just happens. It's something that you have to plan for and then go out and get it. You didn't become the world's best coach overnight, Brad. It took time to get there, but you got there, and it was those stepping stones. So set your goals, set the timeline and the action plan, okay? Because goals don't get accomplished by just saying, hey, I want to, be the best coach in the world. I want to lose 20 pounds. There has to be an action plan and a timeline, and then you actually have to implement it and do it and be consistent, persistent.
Love it. Tony, Alessandra, thanks for being on the Big Success Podcast. If you're listening, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We'll be back again next week. Be well and be successful. And that's the Big Success Podcast for today. Hopefully you took a lot of notes. Hopefully you learned a bunch. And hopefully you're going to take action on it. BS, Brad Sugar's Big Success, take action. Check all the show notes for all of the links. So make sure that you have links to every single thing that every speaker has in our show notes. Check them now. Click the links. Take advantage of it. And I'll speak to you again next time on the Big Success Podcast.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.